Company. Thank You Five is a weekly panel discussion on the topic of what is theater, where we bring theater artists from around the globe into a conversation about live theater in a digital world, spirit of gratitude and innovation. My name's Hank Boland. I'm an ensemble member here at Strawdog Theater Company, have been for about 15 years. If you are watching this live, thank you, on YouTube, you can head over to the strawdog.org site and the Thank You Five page. And there you can join in our chat. You can find out how to ask questions, vote on what questions you want to ask our panelists. Just a way for you to engage more in the show if you want to ask questions. Speaking of panelists, let's meet tonight's guests. We have Tara Anderson, Jennifer Bielstein, Jess Hutchinson, and Beck Lambrecht. Tara, why don't you lead us off with the introductions, please?
I would be glad to. Hi, my name's Tara Anderson. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. My pronouns are she, her. I have a long history with theater. I'm not an actor. I'm a playwright. I'm a producer. I should have been a stage manager. If somebody had told me early on that that was an option, that's probably where I would have gone, because I love telling people where to be and what to do. Professionally, right now, I'm a podcast producer. I work with 10% Happier with Dan Harris, which is a podcast about how to do life better. I am also the producer of the Moth Story Slam here in Louisville. So that's a open mic storytelling competition that is run in conjunction with the Moth, a nationally known storytelling organization. And yeah, that is more or less me. I have an MFA in playwriting from Spalding University here in Louisville, which is where I met our host, Hank. So I am very pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, Tara. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bielstein. I use she, her pronouns. I'm zooming in from Ramaytush land, now known as San Francisco, and I am executive director at American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. And my whole career has been in theater administration, and I was at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis before coming to San Francisco. Prior to that, in Louisville, where I overlapped with Tara while I was at Actors Theater of Louisville. And I was in Chicago for 15 years at Writers Theater, Steppenwolf Theater, About Face Theater, Northlight Theater, and Apple Tree Theater. So glad to be here with this group.
All right. Thank you. Jess.
Hi, I'm Jess Hutchinson. I use she, her pronouns. I live in my favorite place on the planet, Chicago, Illinois. I am a dramaturg and a director. I really love working on new plays. That's kind of my my happy place. I got my MFA from UT Austin in directing, and I'm about to wrap up a master's in social sector leadership and nonprofit management. Yeah, I think that's, I used to run a tiny storefront theater company in Chicago about 10 years ago. And I have 2 cats and a perfect husband. The end.
2 cats and a perfect husband. I'm ready to buy that album. That's awesome. Beck, tell us about yourself.
Hello, I'm Beck. I use they, them pronouns. I am also in Chicago. I have been here for pretty much most of my life, minus my few years I spent in undergrad. I've been working professionally in the Chicago theater scene for about 12 years. In a variety of production-based roles, mostly technical direction and stage management, but have also done lighting design, scenic design, props, painting, all sorts of production things. And I've worked at a bunch of different theaters in Chicago, primarily Black Ensemble Theater, but also Porchlight Music Theater, Northlight. I've done some stuff at Looking Glass, insert here, many of the smaller Chicago theaters, storefront shows. And then I also have been an educator. I've spent about 7 years working at Northwestern University for their summer theater program for the Cherubs program, as it's known. It's the National High School Institute for high schoolers learning theater. And then I also spent a year teaching high school at the Chicago High School for the Arts. Currently, I'm a student at North Park University pursuing my master's in business administration with a certificate in nonprofit management. And I currently work at Chicago Scenic Studios as a project coordinator.
Wow. Fantastic. Wow. You're busy. Wow. Well, we're all busy, right? All right. So the reason we're here, the big question, Jennifer, and we'll go around the room after you answer. What is theater?
You know, it was so fun to be asked this question because I don't feel like I have to ever define theater for someone. I define like how it impacts me and such. So anyway, I just think it's interesting. And I've spent, you know, the past few years just in survival mode, right, of trying to keep the theater alive. But so I guess I think theater is artists and audiences coming together to share stories, to tell stories, and that help people learn about themselves and about others, and to build community.
All right. All right. Jess, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation with a pal earlier today, where we were talking about what is theater and live performance for, and that idea of creating community, of showing, helping us practice how to be more human together by going through this shared experience, these shared stories that we tell, but also seeing not just our own experience reflected, right, but the experiences of others that we maybe don't have personal experience with because it's not our experience, and the recognition through the empathy that gets created in the liveness of the thing, understanding that other people exist, other people are real, right? Like their experiences are real and valid and deserving of respect and kindness and compassion. So I think theater then is a container that is often story based in some form, not necessarily linear story, right? But story and storytelling based. It's live. It involves a group of people coming together in time and not necessarily space, as we have learned, but definitely in time to try to get better at being human.
Nice, nice. Beck.
It's funny. Just like everyone, this is a hard question. I kind of went back thinking about this to very early in undergrad, where you learn the very basics of history, where you talk about theater is a performance in front of an audience, and that makes theater. At its core is that you have something is being performed and you have an audience who is there to consume it. And that dynamic essentially is where we get theater, that connection between the two. And so to me, I would say, I think theater is actually not either one of these two. It's that kind of creation of the experience between both, of the storyteller or the performer or the art that is happening in front of the audience and how the audience is receiving it and kind of then processing that. And then in there we get theater.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Tara.
Wow, there have been some really interesting things said already. I really like what Jess said about it being a container. That's how I always talk about my work with The Moth, because as the producer of the Story Slam, I have no input on the actual content of the evening. It's an open mic. People show up. I don't review or vet the stories in any way. They just sign up, and then we just choose people at random to get up and tell stories, but my job as the producer is to create and maintain the container so that the evening functions in a certain way, people feel safe enough to get up and share. So I think that's very, very important. Thinking about storytelling and how crucial that is. I think we would all say that theater is telling a story. I went to see Beyonce in concert last week, and that was extremely theatrical. I don't know if she was telling a story. She was telling a story about who she is and how we were all just damn lucky to be there, I guess. So I don't think there always has to be spectacle, but there is a sense of intentionality, I think. Like, I am sharing, I've thought about this in advance, and I'm bringing something to you. I like this panel tonight. There is a sense of intentionality, but I don't think it's theater. And get really in the weeds. I have a personal interest in immersive theater and non-traditional forms and atypical settings. And yeah, some things can certainly walk the line. I don't think you have to be in a building. I don't think it has to be an audience of more than one necessarily. So there are lots of different ways to spin it.
It's not theater yet.
Oh,
Tonight is not. No. That's okay. That's amazing. So these are beautiful foundations for an evening of discussion. And yeah, there's lots of there's lots of things I want to talk about already. But I'm going to ask another question, and that's going to Jess. So the other part of why we're here doing this, what is theater in the digital age? What does that phrase even mean to you? When you hear theater in the digital age, what happens to your spine? I don't know, right? like where, like your gut, like what happens? What does that mean to you?
So I love this question. I think the word intentionality, Tara, that you used means a lot to me in the response to that question, right? I had a professor in MFA school that one of the first questions he ever asked us was if theater was a self-authorizing event. Like, did you need anybody else's permission to call something an act of theater? And which makes me think about that intentionality. And then in the digital age, I think it makes me think about that question makes me think about how we've been, and I think are continuing to, whether we like it or not, open the aperture of how we think about our work as theater makers, how we think about our responsibility. This is something I've been thinking about a lot, like how we think about our responsibility to our audiences, like our responsibility to anybody we ask to, as my friend earlier today said, to put on pants and come to something, right? Like, it has to be really good if it's going to cross the putting on pants threshold. And I think about the digital things that we've all been learning how to do in the last 3 years-ish as being a real potential boon for accessibility. And the potentially, if we can figure it out, something that can act for other kinds of theater the way that cast albums act for musicals, right? That offer a way to get a taste or a sense of the thing from potentially a very great distance, and to create a parasocial relationship, right? Like I have with my friends who live in the TV shows that I watch, like create a connection with the work such that then it's meaningful to you. Because I think, I'm going to stop once I put a pin in this notion, I think where we are as an industry right now is in a crisis of meaning for our audiences.
I want you to say that again.
That
Where we are as an industry.
I think we're in a crisis of meaning.
Okay. I want to come back to that. I think we probably all do. Beck, what are you thinking? Theater in the digital.
I have a lot of really pro theater digital age feelings. Just being in the last 3 years at Northlight, we really struggled with the concept of like, what do we do when we were shut down in 2020? We had a full set. We had a whole production that we could have performed, and our first performance, we were shut down. Could we just film it? Is that still theater? And I feel like the answer is not quite yes, because going back kind of to earlier what was said about theater, the intentionality, I think that intentionality needs to exist on both sides of the coin here. I think there needs to be intentionality of the performance, but also intentionality of the engagement of the audience, which I think you can get in a digital form. I always think about, the thing I compared this to a lot is I am a consumer of live streams of actual play RPGs, because I think that that is a form of theater, because they are performers. And especially if it's a live stream, you have a chat, you're engaging, you are part of a community in that moment, even though you're all sitting at a screen consuming it at the same time, but you're interacting with each other. The performers might be able to actually see the chat, and they can engage with the chat. So there is that kind of give and take between the performance and the audience you get in the live theater. So I think that the digital age has a lot of opportunities. I really like what Jess pointed out about the accessibility of digital theater and the fact that it is opening doors to both a wider audience that you maybe have never been able to reach before, but also just to reduce barriers that prevented people from getting to your theater.
All right. Tara.
What do I think theater is in the digital age? Oy. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, there's a difference between like doing things online because we have to, which we all lived that for a year and a half, 2 years, to, doing things online because there's a good reason to, for accessibility purposes, or because the performance is somehow lends itself to the digital form. I remember hearing about a play, I didn't see it, but it was delivered on Zoom like a community meeting. And I thought that was a really cool idea, right? Like, we've all been part of a meeting on Zoom, and maybe it goes awry. Like that could be a cool idea, like using the form, not just doing it because we couldn't be in the same room together. I am still like a huge proponent of being in the space together. I feel like there is something honestly irreplaceable about that. My older child just finished up a run of 15 performances in Macbeth at Kentucky Shakespeare, and they served something like 22,000 people this summer. And that is, Jennifer knows this company well. It's, it is accessible, it's free, it's ticketless, it's in a public park in the middle of the city. It's a huge cross section. I mean, it's accessible in terms of money, and a lot of people can get to it. And, they served, tens of thousands of people. And there is something really special about being there when the squirrels are running around in the trees and the airplanes are flying overhead. So to me, I have not yet seen a whole lot of digital theater that I feel like really takes advantage of the form as much as maybe it could. And I personally am just more excited by going out and being in the room with other people when I can.
Okay. Jennifer.
Yeah, I for a long time have been really interested in exploring how we use technology more in our art form and how we create it and how we deliver it, and felt like I was mostly going against the grain pre-pandemic, that and my interest was more about access and just getting more people to see our work and distribute it in that way. I hadn't, like Tara, what you said about being forced to do it really resonates, because so I was excited about it pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic forced us and gave us that opportunity to try a lot of things. And I found it really invigorating. Like I wish that we didn't have COVID and that the pandemic had never happened. I would prefer that, of course, but it did. And we at ACT, we tested a number of things. We did plays on Zoom that were live. You were watching them live. And I just thought the direction and the staging and the creativity with props and sets was ingenious. It was just so interesting to see what people came up with. We did readings that were some of the most interesting readings because of just the creativity in them, instead of everybody being on the stage, in front of you with music stands. And we commissioned Christopher Chen to write a play to be performed and delivered over Zoom. And we asked the premise to be about a con. And so it was live. And it was one of the biggest, I had that emotional gut punch that I want from a challenging piece of theater from that. And so I think that there are things that we can do digitally that resonate and make sense, and that are theater. But I will say, generally our experience at ACT and what I hear from people across the field is that at the beginning of the pandemic, there was great interest in having, content delivered online. I think people got screened out after a time, just didn't want to be staring at the computer much anymore. And what they really want from us and what we do best is in person, and that live in-person experience, although it can be live digitally, but that they really want that live in person from us. So yeah, I guess that's what I think about theater in the digital age. And I still want to keep experimenting and trying new things. I mean, I think we have to. I think we'd be foolish not to, but because we don't know what the future holds. But I think the in-person is really wonderful now to be back to it.
Yeah, I think, to your point, we don't know what the future holds, right? It might be another pandemic, or it could just be terrible weather that keeps us at home. But but that shouldn't stop us. Wow. Okay. So I want to hear more about this container idea. I love that, but also back what I want to make sure I got this right. This idea that the theater is in that space between the art and the audience, right? So it's is light a wave? Is light a, yeah. So it's sort of nebulous, but that to me feels like a really great, magical answer, right? That's the poetry answer, which is great, as opposed to the really physical scientific answer. I know, talk amongst yourselves about all of that, but also I want to know, because Tara teased us pre-show with a digital theater piece she saw that, and I want to know about that now. Now seems like the time.
Yeah, we were talking about, what works well in a digital form, and what maybe was less successful. And the play that I saw that I thought worked really well in the digital form was The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity, as performed by the off-Broadway cast, the original off-Broadway cast. And it's a show that, to me, I saw it at Actors in Louisville, and it was stunning. I mean, it's just a stunning play, and the production was gorgeous. There was a boxing ring that descended, from the ceiling. You know, there's dancers throwing dollar bills in the aisles. It's a very like experiential, I'm in the middle of this. They worked with wrestlers. I mean, there's people body slamming on the floor, right? It's very much something a spectacle that you want to enjoy in person. So this was something done during like lockdown, when we couldn't go see any theater. I believe it was some kind of a fundraiser. I don't even remember how I heard about it. It was the original off-Broadway cast, who was amazing. And they made the fights work because they picked up their laptops or their phones or whatever and swung around with them. I can't do it, but like the camera was here and they, you know, and swinging around, and they did a great job of coordinating. You know, this guy shoves that guy, and the guy he shoves falls on the floor, you know, and you see, and it worked so well. Who knows if I would have liked it as much if I hadn't seen the play in a, you know, a more traditional production, but they used the movement of their camera to give you the feeling of being in the middle of a fight. And I was just so impressed with it. The other thing that was really great about that was, you know, this was during a time when I couldn't be in the same room as my parents, who are in their 70s. And so we had rigged up a thing where I would like we would get on Zoom together, and then I would share my screen of what I was watching so that we could watch together. And I remember telling them about, like, this play's amazing, you're going to love it. And we watched it together from our, you know, houses down the block when we couldn't be in the same place. And that was really great. So I think that where we've been talking about, you know, creating a community or a shared experience, I would have enjoyed the play a lot even if I had been just at home by myself, but that I was sharing it with somebody else. I think that was also really powerful. But I was struck by the innovation of not using a static shot. And it also helped that those actors were fantastic and really, you know, really knew the play and embodied those characters. So there's a lot of reasons I think that worked, which start with a great script.
I had a similar response to ACT, actually, doing In Love and Warcraft with the conservatory students, that had a similar, like they were using different devices in the process of making this performance, which I also know because then Peter, whose last name escapes me, who directed it, help me, Jennifer.
Peter Quo.
Quo. Thank you. Peter Quo gave a Zoom directing class that I took because I remember, especially after I saw that production, feeling like, oh, we are actually witnessing the birth of a new form if we want, right? Like,
oh, I just want to clarify, it was a class in how to direct for Zoom. Is that what he was teaching you? Cool. Okay.
Yeah, because he did stuff like, so all of his actors were in different physical places, some of them like across the country from each other because they could be. And so there were things like he sent all of them the same painting. Like he made 4 or 5 or however many different copies of this painting and sent it to all of them. So you would see when there were 2 people that were supposed to be sitting next to each other on the couch, you would see the same painting on their wall, but they would be in relationship to the painting in such a way that it looked like they were it was remarkable. It looked like they were in the same space. And then in this class, he was like, okay, yeah, so here's how it was kind of like the magician reveals his secrets in this class. And it felt like, and where I think I started to feel a little bit of disappointment in our industry was this sort of binary thinking around this either or-ness of like, it's either theater or it's not, right? Or like there wasn't, I feel like in some ways we sort of squandered, we wasted a good crisis, right? We had the opportunity to create a new form, because I don't think that the aliveness and the together, like the holy art form of theater where we are together in the room, yeah, there's nothing like that, absolutely. And being separated and in our little boxes is different. And I guess I had a desire for us to let those things exist separately and at the same time, and let the Zoom theater and the innovative storytelling methodology, right, that meant you can have people from all over the planet collaborating together. I mean, I was working for National New Play Network during most of the early days of the pandemic, most like the first couple of years of the pandemic, and I produced a couple of new play showcases, and we were able, and that organization has a I think it just crossed into $1 million annual general operating, and we didn't have the money, right, to bring in actors from all over to, like, we couldn't always afford to bring in the best actor for the role. When we produced these readings digitally, man, those readings were probably the best that we'd ever produced, because we had this person in Minneapolis and this person in Sarasota and this person in like London or wherever, because we were able to, because the barrier of travel and the expense of it was no longer a problem. Because it had back.
It's actually one of the things that I really struggled with as a production side of things in the Zoom theater world was the fact that a lot of production people kind of got pushed out because there was this perception that there wasn't a good way to include that. And I love the examples you both provided, both of just like using the camera, which in a lot of ways is lighting design, because you're using focus of directing the eye, which you could do with lighting effects. You're using scenic design of the painting in the background to make it seem like two people are in the same room together while it's alive. It's not digital. It's not, green screen. So I love the idea that you can actually incorporate more of the design elements than I had even considered before, because so much of what we saw was here we are in a box with everyone is a head in a box, and that's what you produce as your Zoom theater, which is fine, but certainly is missing that kind of quality of taking a step into a work of collaborative art that live theater is.
Yes, that's a great point about all of the other professionals and creativity that goes into creating the work. I also remember seeing another piece of Zoom theater in which I believe it was the actor, it was a one-person show, had constructed a series of really elaborate, like little dollhouse type sets. And they actually used a camera, and he had a camera operator that kind of zoomed through the tiny little sets, and you could actually see his hands manipulating things. And I was like, "Ooh, theatrical on Zoom," right? That was what I was looking for, was theatrical. And I hadn't seen it much until then. Yeah.
We've got the word theatrical. We know what that means, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Like we can nail that. Boom, boom. That was it.
What was that Supreme Court decision about, like, pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Theatrical.
Yeah.
It's harder to define, but I know it when I see it.
I know it when I see it. Okay. Who am I gonna Beck, I'm gonna ask you a question. We've talked about, what is theater, digital age, all of that. We're going, gosh, every day I'm reading a new article about how the industry is in crisis and dying, right? So here's a question. Why in 2023 are we still doing theater at all? What is the reason for it? Why do we do it? Why don't we, and we had, I'll talk a little bit so you can work on an answer there. A couple weeks ago, we had James Sherman, a playwright and an educator. And, he was talking about yeah, but there's still so many people going to theater school. There's so many. I'm teaching so many freshmen and everybody. So it's is this man, I'm gonna scrimshaw, right? The art of carving on whale bones. Are we teaching people scrimshaw? Why are we still doing theater in 2023?
I feel like there's probably people somewhere still doing scrimshaw, to be honest. Rarely does an entire art form totally die, but because honestly, it's just we need art. That's just, I think, a piece of being human, is that we're always going to seek out art. Otherwise, we wouldn't have art museums to go experience art in a place. We have always wanted, as humans, to fulfill that need to be challenged in a way, I guess. We want to consume art so that we can process it and think about it and then come up with our own ideas off of it. We want our brains to think creatively about various concepts, about hearing the stories from other perspectives, because we want to know more, presumably, or just to explore things that are outside of yourself. I don't think that's ever going to stop. And there is, that is kind of the thing that makes theater different than going and seeing a movie, is that experience of being with people, of seeing a thing made by a group of people, and you're with a group of people, and together you're a different group of people, and you are in that moment, that container, there's your container. In that moment, you are having a unique experience that you're not going to be able necessarily to recreate. Even if you saw the same show again with the same exact group of people and the same exact audience, it will probably still be different because people are going to react slightly differently. The mood might be slightly different. So it's something you can't recreate.
I'd love to jump in. Oh my gosh, people want theater. For all of those reasons, Beck, that you said, but people want it. We are just in the most challenging of times in terms of the model and how it evolved. And, without going through a big history lesson, right? But it was started with major foundation and government investment, right? In the regional theater, to have theaters in every neighborhood, every city, and cities across the country. And the economics have just shifted so dramatically. And we all, as nonprofit theaters, want to make our work accessible to people and have accessibly priced tickets and don't charge what commercial theater charges. And then costs have just gone up so dramatically, right? It's all out of whack right now with the less government investment, less from foundations, less from corporations. Ticket sales we've kept at reasonably priced and not necessarily priced in pace with inflation. And then costs have skyrocketed, and we always underpaid people and want to invest more in people. So they've reasonably gone up, right? Because no one is making a fortune working in theater. So there's just a gap. And so we're losing theaters. Okay, not no one, but we are in this place where we are losing some theaters. I'm very worried for the field. And I am advocating that The federal government, I think the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant is a great model, and about 2 to 3 billion of that helped live theaters across the country. And if the government can invest 2 to 3 billion in theater annually, we could get through this kind of crisis that we're in. It would give us the runway, and then we could thrive, and we could do more for social cohesion, for building community, building empathy, for the economy, and with our economic impact, and supporting other small businesses and such. So I think that's a drop in the bucket for our government, and I think we really need to rally together to advocate for that. So sorry, Jess.
No, with so much respect, Jennifer, with so much respect, I want to challenge two things. I want to challenge the notion that the regional theater movement began with government funding. I would point to Margot Jones, Zelda Fitzhandler, and Nina Vance, who started from the point of view that there needed to be art that was of and by and from the community in which their theaters were grounded, and where they sat, and theater that was specific to those communities, that was telling stories that were meaningful to the people in those communities. And then once those three women sort of gave proof of concept, right, then the Ford Foundation can swoop in and start to kick things off. And then we've got, Tyrone Guthrie putting a full page ad in the New York Times asking, whom will host my magnificent great man theater that I will run like a dragon on my horde. And the other thing I want to challenge is that notion of, I've got some beef with Tyrone Guthrie. He doesn't know we're in a fight, but we're in a fight. And then the other thing, so for one of my, I took a financial management for nonprofits course as part of my MA coursework recently, and one of my projects was to do an analysis. I analyzed the financials of 5 Chicago theaters, the publicly available, like the 990s and the audited financials, and I found that it's public information, I'll just say it. The Goodman Theater, for their most recently published financials, the top 2, the artistic and executive directors' salaries combined were more than the next 5 highest paid staff members combined. So those 2 were making more money themselves than the next 5 senior staff combined. And I think that for me indicates a brokenness in or a corruption of the model of the regional theater that I think we need to investigate in terms of equity and accessibility, not just for the audiences, but for people who want to be part of the industry too. Because there are people that cannot survive when you factor in student loan debt for those theater schools that are still chock full of students, right? People are still taking on mountains and mountains and mountains of debt to go to theater school so that they can come out with a degree. And if they're lucky, get a job that will probably not pay them enough to make ends meet when you factor in those student loan payments, because there is such a disparity between even folks coming into administrative jobs, right? Like if you're coming into an entry-level job at a regional theater in Chicago, the difference in what you're making versus what the top leadership is making it feels like something that we expect out of corporate America, and that feels real sketchy to me in the nonprofit industry.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that more, Jess, because this is precisely why I made the choice to pursue a master's in business, being in that position of being in a lower management role at a nonprofit and being constantly told the money isn't there, and knowing that the top salaries were 3 times my salary. And I was in middle. There were people below me who are making an eighth, maybe, of what they're making. And Northlight, I was like, I'll say it because it's public information. It's on their 990. You can look it up. Is certainly one of the better ones, because it is not like the 2 top are more than the next 5. Generally, the spread is actually pretty equitable compared to some of the other Chicago theaters that I have looked at. So there is that. But so whenever I hear the money isn't there, I could always say, it is if you think about it. You have a pool, and maybe we need to re-examine, because really what you're talking about, Jess, and comparing it to corporate structure, is what I think has happened is we've seen, similar to CEO pay, skyrocket because corporate companies are trying to attract the best talent, so they have to offer the best package. We've seen that same competitiveness in a lot of theater companies to their detriment, because you have to offer the best package to get the right person to lead your organization. And then you get stuck in making essentially contracts at these high levels of pay, so that you're outpricing basically somewhere else that they might want to go. And that's national, because you're pulling from everywhere. So we've hit this unfortunate period of time where it's kind of just escalated, and we are getting into dangerous levels of pay disparity between the top and bottom. And it is just, it makes me very sad, because I think we are losing a lot of opportunity in diversifying the workforce and bringing in new talent, because they just cannot afford to do theater, because you have to, essentially at this point, you have to come into it with a certain level of privilege in order to participate.
Yeah, and to circle back to both of those topics. So I was saying I wasn't giving like a full exact history of it, but like, so yeah, Zelda and Nina and Margot, all hail. Yeah. But there was more substantial investment from certain sources in our sector than there is today, undoubtedly.
Oh,
and
for
I
sure.
think I guess I also, I don't know, I remember, I empathize with it all, because I remember living in Chicago and crying because I couldn't afford to buy new socks, like based on the salary I was making in theater. Like and that's what I was trying to say. Like we haven't adjusted all the things in the model. Everybody should be making more. Like we should be able to have the resource from our communities to invest more in the people. We are a people-based art form. We're for people, like created by people, and everyone needs to be invested in properly so that people can live healthy lives. So just wanted to add that perspective.
Well, I think too, we have to think about what we as an industry are asking, and what individual theater makers, individual companies are asking people to invest in too. Like, are we asking them to invest in what are we my boss at NNPN would sometimes talk about the new play exchange was created so that you didn't have to have the New York Times be your literary department, right? So this, which I have other thoughts about, but the idea that, oh, well, we'll recycle what was hip in New York or what won the Tony 3 years ago, right? Like that doesn't have that same, and obviously not everybody is doing that, obviously, but there's still a lot of, like, the plays that make the rounds, and this play is getting 700 productions at various and sundry regional theaters. And I have curiosity about what is it about that play in every community that is speaking directly to the questions and what's keeping the neighbors up at night, and what they're trying to talk to their kids about that they don't know how to frame, right? Like, how are these plays that have pull quotes from Jesse Green in the Times or whoever, are we sure that that's how we can best make meaning for and with our community, as opposed to something like, I think about Jack Ruler and now Mark Valdez at Mixed Blood in Minneapolis, who are, they changed the mission of the company to be, this is a social justice organization that uses theater as one of its tools, right? And so that's a very specific thing. But when Mark came in, one of the first things one of the first big projects was he's created work in all 12 of Minneapolis's neighborhoods with 12 different community-based organizations. So it's this like legacy, and that's building on Jack. And I can fangirl about Jack Ruler all day, but it's building on Jack's legacy and foundation of being so deeply concerned with what it is that's present in his community that needs to be talked about. And I don't know that that we are talking enough with, I don't know that we're creating the container where that actual co-creation, that magic between the people making the thing and the people coming to see the thing can happen.
One of the big questions we asked at Northlight during the pandemic, we took the time to really examine a lot of our practices. I was part of our equity, diversity, inclusion committee, and we went to upper management and we basically asked them the question, who is the community that you want to serve? It's in the mission. We're supposed to be serving the community, but it seems like we're serving a very specific community that is not reflecting even the demographic immediately around our building. So how do we fix that? Because we aren't actually engaging our communities in the way that they need to be engaged. And that's where I think digital theater can do that, because of the greater accessibility that it's like, I'm bringing it back to this digital theater and how I think we can use innovation to actually rethink the model, because the model is not working, and its current pace, I don't know how it will continue to function, because I don't see how government is really it would be great if government gave us more funding. I don't see that happening. So we need to re-examine, and this is what I wish more companies were doing, is re-examining then, what do we do? How do maybe we do rewrite the mission? And that was something we certainly talked about, is like, maybe we need to rewrite the mission, because we aren't really serving it by not really engaging with the community, unless we want to define what community we're trying to serve in our capacity as a theater. So I don't know. I was like, that is a great question of who is the community. Is it just your local community? Is it your specific audience that is coming in all the time? Is it the greater community of people who want art?
Tara, a while back, it looked like you were going to jump in.
I'm not sure at which point that was.
Okay. It was the point you turned on your microphone and leaned in, but yeah.
There's what I think I was going to say something to the effect that, like, we all know that ticket sales don't cover production costs, right? So, there's going to be a gap there, no matter what, even if you try to keep your tickets reasonably priced for your market, it's still just not going to cover it. And here in Louisville, as Jen was saying, being part of the Humana Festival of New American Plays and all of the incredibly exciting work that came out of that, and just as a theater goer, every year that was my favorite part of the year. It was so exciting to see 5 or 6 brand new plays. That doesn't really exist anymore. In the corporate sponsorship has been rolled back, so Humana is not really directing their charitable giving. They say they're focusing more on like health related initiatives, which makes sense for a health insurance company. And also, I would argue that theater can be part of a health initiative. Maybe not in a in like actually lowering your blood pressure today kind of way, but that engaging with art is an important part of being a healthy person. We also know that a big festival like that was run by a lot of apprentices who were not making a lot of money, who were working their tails off. So you could argue it was a great professional experience for a lot of them. For others, it wasn't a great professional experience, but the only way to make that thing happen, my understanding, and Jennifer, please correct me, was that you needed just like a lot of bodies to make it all work. And they don't have, 50 people in their 20s now who can help make it happen for 6 weeks. So, yeah, the model has fallen apart for that particular thing, which was hugely important to the city of Louisville and its economy. All of the folks that came in for that, and all of the ancillary, businesses around the theater, and also really important for theater in this country and supporting development of new work and the connections that were made during that festival. So, I mean, I'm brokenhearted that doesn't exist anymore, as just as a theater goer and as a writer. And it just feels like, I don't know, I know the folks at Actors Theater who are working there now are doing their very best and trying to reconceive how to make their organization work. And they have definitely taken a much more explicitly social justice stance. And I support that. And their existing audience, I don't know how many people are still going. They had their the two big shows, Dracula and A Christmas Carol, that were reliably there, are not there anymore. So, in a lot of ways, my understanding was that those two shows, were a pretty reliable financial engine, and they're not even existing anymore. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see in, 5 years, out of the grips of the immediate crisis that we've all been through, who's still around and what they're still doing, and in what form. I just don't know.
But, well, first of all, I'll have you all back in 5 years. We'll check in 2028 and see how we're all doing. But to a point, and I think we've all said this in one way or another, like 22,000 people came and saw Shakespeare in Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
over 15 nights, 15 performances.
That was 6 weeks of rotating performances, 3 plays.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I went to a show a couple weeks ago, sold out, right? Like, like there are people that are like, as much as there are people going to shows.
Yes.
There are people consuming theater, right? And right, like, what does it take to make it to allow them to consume it? Sure, right? Like, it can be ugly, but wow. Yeah, and to like Jennifer and Jess's point, and a lot of what Beck said, like, it's the model, it's the institution that feels like, right? Like, that's where we need the help to figure that part out.
And also to speak to that container idea again, I think one of the reasons that Kentucky Shakespeare is so successful and so popular here is because they have thought about the container. Everything from benches, they replaced all of their old uncomfortable wooden benches a few years ago with like better kind of like plastic wrapped metal benches that are more stable. They brought in food trucks that are reliably there and they tell you in advance what the food trucks are. There is an on-site bar, so you can go buy yourself a beer or a Coke or whatever. There is a pre-show every night from a different community group. They redid the bathrooms a few years ago. It's in a public park, so it's like kind of, a public park kind of bathroom. The ladies was around the backside of this building in the dark, and it had like 2 stalls in it a few years ago. They flipped them. They put the ladies' room on the bright side of the building where everybody is, and it's a bigger room. It's with like 6 stalls in it, so you didn't get stuck in a huge line at intermission. Those kind of things, creating the container, improving the audience experience, I think is also really, really important. It's not just that like 500-year-old plays are this popular. They make it fun for you to come. You can bring your dog, you can bring your kids, you can bring your own food if you want, or you can buy from the food truck. Like it's an entire experience. It's not just what's on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to think about those things too.
Clearly it passes the put on pants threshold.
It does.
Oh, yeah.
It does.
Yeah,
Just barely.
Right? Like clearly this seems like it has met that intentionality. All right. I'm looking at the clock and I'm feeling like it's time to sort of start wrapping up. I'm going to throw out a question. I got some business to do, some thank yous and things like that. But while I'm thinking about that, or while I'm doing that, I want you all to think, this is just off the top of your head, a book. What book have you read recently? What theater book? What thing? What script? What play? What should we all be reading that you've just read? So let me go ahead and do the wrap ups and outros and all that good stuff. It's thank you 5. So I'm going to give you 5 thank yous. Thank you 1 to this amazing panel for their time and their insights and their thoughts and their respect. Thank you. Thank you 2 to Kyle Hammond for creating and producing the show. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you number 3 to officehours.global, Edwin Ruiz and Mondo Machine for helping to make it all possible. Thank you number 4. The show is made possible by Strawdog Theater Company and its ensemble members. Strawdog Theater is run on a free theater model where our productions are available to anyone and everyone free of charge. We can only do this with generous donations from the community. You can find out more information about donating or becoming a Strawdog sustaining subscriber to continuously support our work and stuff like this. Come and be a $5 member for Thank You 5. We'd appreciate that. And thank you 5 to the folks who are out there, who are viewing, participating, watching the show, supporting it. You want to be on it? Shoot us an email. We'd love to have you here. And we'll see you next week for all of those conversations. Next week, we've got Billy Bullion, Allison Kane, Kira Fromm, and Wendy McLeod. So, book recommendations. What do you got? Let's
clarify, does it have to be a theater related book?
I'm gonna say no.
Okay. Great, then I will go first because I know exactly what I'm going to recommend, because I finished this book weeks ago and I'm never going to stop thinking about it ever in my life. It's called The Politics Industry. It is an examination of American politics and the political system and the model that exists, and ways why, 1, history why it's broken, 2, how it's functioning currently, and 3, hopefully ways that we can fix it. So highly recommend for anybody who is a voting person in America, which is hopefully everybody, and that's one of the things it talks about is you should vote. And if you feel like it's not worth it, it tells you why you feel that way.
Wow. The Politics Industry. Okay. Author or authors?
I had just pulled it up. It is written by Catherine Gell and Michael Porter.
Okay, awesome. Great. Who's next?
I'll go next. And I will also say politics is theater, right? So I think that works. It's storytelling. It's, trying to convince somebody of something. Oh, there's a child and the dog.
Spectacle.
Yes, exactly. Except was it intentional? No. Um, so the last theater book I read that I really enjoyed is all about the work of director Les Waters. It's called The Theater of Les Waters, and I feel so fortunate to have lived in Louisville at the same time that he was working here. And some of my most memorable experiences at the theater were things that he had a hand in. And the book is really, really good. It's alternating interviews and conversations with people about him. Oh, go back to sleep, baby. With musings from him himself and some memories of how a particular production came together, and lots of conversations with actors who worked with him. I have had the opportunity to interview him several times for some articles I was writing, and I still find him very enigmatic. So it's a good read and very inspiring. So that's my most, I think it's called The Theater of Les Waters.
Yeah, I have to jump in on that. I have a chapter in that book.
Yes, yes.
Published like that. So that's
Yeah.
fun. And my answer is a bad answer. I don't have a book to recommend. All I do is read articles from the news locally and nationally and from American theater and play scripts. So I am super over the moon excited about the show we are in rehearsal for, Hippest Trip, the Soul Train musical. And it is not only about the music and dancing, but it is an amazing story about Don Cornelius and the importance to the United States, to Black America that TV show has. So it's a great story. Look out for it.
When are you opening?
Previews are August 25th and it runs through October 1st.
All right. Thank you.
I am going to cheat and give two answers. The first is a novel called We Play Ourselves by Jen Silverman, who is also a playwright. And if you love the theater, which I assume we all in this room and anyone who happens to be watching this do, it's beautiful, and Jen is a wicked genius, and it's a beautiful debut novel. And then I am reading right now The Gift by Lewis Hyde, about gift economy and how art operates simultaneously in both the market and the gift economies, and what that means. I think it means this. I'm only a little bit into the book, but yeah, it's an oldie but a goodie.
All right. Hey, thank you all so much. Deep gratitude to all of you for taking the time to be here and sharing all of those thoughts and all of the conversation. Folks, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. All right.